So, I've been hiking for years now. I know these woods like the back of my hand, or at least, I thought I did. But last week, I went on a solo trek deeper into the forest than I'd ever gone before, and let me tell you, things got real scary, real fast. It started out like any other hike, beautiful scenery, fresh air, the whole deal. But as the day wore on and the sun started to set, I realized I'd gotten myself lost. I tried to retrace my steps, but everything looked different in the fading light, and pretty soon, I had no idea where I was. I started to panic, my heart pounding in my chest as I realized I might have to spend the night out here alone. I knew I needed to find shelter, somewhere safe to wait out the night, so I kept trudging through the woods, hoping I'd stumble upon something, anything, that could help me. And then, just when I was about to give up hope, I saw it, an old, abandoned cabin tucked away in a clearing, its windows boarded up and its roof sagging with age. I hesitated at first, not sure if it was safe to approach, but I was running out of options, so I decided to take my chances. As I got closer, I could see signs of recent occupancy, fresh footprints in the dirt, a faint wisp of smoke curling up from the chimney. My blood ran cold at the thought of who, or what, might be inside, but I knew I had no other choice. I cautiously pushed open the door and stepped inside, my heart hammering in my chest as I braced myself for whatever I might find. The cabin was dark and musty, the air thick with the smell of decay, but there was no sign of anyone or anything lurking in the shadows. I let out a shaky breath, relieved to find the cabin empty, and quickly set about making myself comfortable for the night. I built a fire in the hearth, barricaded the door with whatever furniture I could find, and settled down to wait out the darkness. But as the hours passed and the night grew colder, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside, sent shivers down my spine, and I found myself jumping at every little sound. I tried to tell myself I was just being paranoid, that it was all in my head, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. And then, just as I was starting to drift off to sleep, I heard it, a low, guttural growl coming from somewhere outside the cabin. My blood ran cold as I realized I wasn't alone out here in the woods. There was something else out there with me, something dangerous, something hungry. I huddled closer to the fire, praying for morning to come quickly, but the night stretched on endlessly, the darkness closing in around me like a suffocating blanket. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the first light of dawn broke through the trees, casting long shadows across the forest floor. I wasted no time gathering my things and getting out of that cabin, running as fast as my legs would carry me until I finally stumbled upon the trail I'd lost the day before. I made it back to civilization in one piece, but I'll never forget the terror of that night in the woods. So, I'm pretty into camping and stuff. I like getting out into the wilderness, away from all the noise and hustle of the city. Last weekend, I decided to set up camp in this remote part of the woods that I'd heard about from a friend. Everything was going great at first. I set up my tent, started a fire, and cooked myself some dinner. It was peaceful out there, just me and the sounds of nature all around. But then, as night fell and I was getting ready to go to sleep, I heard something outside my tent. At first, I thought it was just an animal or something, but then I heard it again, footsteps, circling around my tent in the darkness. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to do. I mean, who else would be out here in the middle of the night? I mustered up the courage to peek out of my tent, and that's when I saw him, a lone hunter, standing just beyond the glow of my campfire, watching me from the shadows. I felt a chill run down my spine as our eyes met. He didn't say anything, didn't move. He just stood there, silently observing me like I was some kind of prey. I tried to act casual, like I hadn't noticed him, but it was impossible to ignore the feeling of unease that settled over me. I mean, What was he doing out here in the middle of nowhere? And why was he watching me like that? I decided to confront him, to ask him what he was doing there and why he was watching me. But when I stepped out of my tent, he vanished into the darkness, like he was never there at all. I searched the woods around my campsite, but there was no sign of him anywhere. It was like he had just disappeared into thin air. I didn't get much sleep that night, I can tell you that much. Every little noise made me jump, every shadow made me paranoid. I kept expecting him to come back, to finish whatever he had started. The next morning, I packed up my things as quickly as I could and got out of there. I didn't want to stick around and find out what that guy's deal was. I just wanted to get as far away from him as possible. I reported the encounter to the park rangers when I got back to town, but they didn't seem too concerned. They said there were a lot of hunters in the area and that it was probably just a misunderstanding. But I know what I saw, and it wasn't just some innocent hunter out for a stroll in the woods. There was something off about that guy, something that didn't sit right with me. I haven't been back to that part of the woods since, and I don't plan on going back anytime soon. I'll stick to camping in more populated areas from now on, where there are other people around to keep an eye out for me. But sometimes, late at night when I'm lying in bed, I can't help but wonder what would have happened if I hadn't seen him when I did. So, me and my friends, we decided to go camping deep in the woods for a weekend getaway. It seemed like a great idea at the time, you know, getting away from the city, reconnecting with nature, all that jazz. But things didn't exactly go as planned. We hiked for hours, deep into the heart of the forest, until we stumbled upon this makeshift campsite. At first, we thought it was abandoned, just a bunch of tarps and old cans lying around. But then we saw him, this guy, wild-eyed and unkempt, like he hadn't seen civilization in years. He called himself a survivalist, said he'd been living off the land for as long as he could remember. At first, we thought he was just a little eccentric, you know, a bit of a loner. But then he started acting strange, like he didn't want us there. We tried to be friendly, offered him some food and water, but he just grunted and turned away. It was like he didn't trust us, like he thought we were trying to steal his territory or something. We set up camp not too far from his, hoping to avoid any confrontation. But as the night wore on, things started to get tense. We could hear him moving around in the darkness, muttering to himself in a language we couldn't understand. I tried to tell my friends that we should pack up and leave, that it wasn't safe to stay there. But they brushed it off, said I was overreacting, that the guy was probably harmless. But then, in the middle of the night, we heard him creeping around our campsite, like he was stalking us. I grabbed a flashlight and went to investigate, my heart pounding in my chest with every step I took. I found him lurking in the shadows, watching us with this intense, predatory stare. He didn't say a word, just stood there, like he was sizing us up, trying to decide if we were a threat. I tried to reason with him, to explain that we were just here to enjoy the woods, but he wouldn't listen. He kept muttering about how the forest belonged to him, how we were trespassing on his territory. I could feel the tension mounting, like a storm brewing on the horizon. I knew we had to get out of there, but it was too late. He lunged at us, wild and feral, like a cornered animal. We fought back, trying to defend ourselves as best we could. But he was strong, stronger than any of us had anticipated. It was like he had the strength of the forest behind him, like he was part of it in some primal, elemental way. In the chaos of the struggle, I managed to break free and make a run for it. I could hear my friends shouting behind me, their voices drowned out by the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, my lungs burning with exertion, my muscles screaming for relief. But I didn't stop, didn't look back, not until I reached the safety of the trailhead, with the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. I collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath, my body trembling with adrenaline. It was over, we were safe, but the memory of that night would haunt me forever. I don't know what happened to my friends, if they made it out alive or if they fell victim to that feral survivalist in the woods. All I know is that I'll never go camping again, not after what I saw out there in the darkness. So, I'm a nature photographer, right? And I'm always on the lookout for that perfect shot, that one image that'll take your breath away. So, I decided to explore the deep woods, really get off the beaten path and see what I could find. I was wandering through the trees, my camera in hand, when I stumbled upon this clearing. At first, I thought it was just another patch of forest, nothing special. But then I saw these sculptures, if you could even call them that, made from bones and branches. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest, my instinct screaming at me to turn back. But I couldn't tear my eyes away from those eerie figures, like something out of a nightmare. They were so lifelike, so detailed, like whoever had made them had put their heart and soul into every piece. But there was something off about them, something unnatural, that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to take a few pictures, to capture the scene before me, but my hands were shaking too badly. It was like the air itself was thick with dread, like I was being watched by unseen eyes. I didn't stay long, didn't dare to linger in that cursed place a moment longer than necessary. I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my ears, my footsteps echoing through the silent forest. I didn't stop running until I was miles away, back in the safety of civilization. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me like a dark cloud. I tried to put it out of my mind, to focus on my work and move on with my life. But those sculptures haunted my dreams, their twisted forms lurking in the shadows of my subconscious. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stumbled upon something ancient and malevolent, something that should have stayed buried deep in the heart of the forest. I tried to warn people, to tell them what I'd seen out there in the woods. But no one believed me, not even my closest friends and family. They said I was imagining things, that I'd let my imagination run wild. But I knew the truth, knew that there was something out there in the woods, something dark and sinister, waiting to be discovered. I tried to go back, to find the clearing again and prove to myself that it was all just a bad dream. But no matter how hard I searched, I couldn't find it, like it had vanished into thin air. I started to question my own sanity, to wonder if I'd imagined the whole thing. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I knew what I'd seen out there in the woods, and I knew that I'd never forget it for as long as I lived. So, I've learned my lesson. Sometimes, it's better to let sleeping dogs lie, to leave well enough alone and not go looking for trouble. My name's Afia, and I'm a 24-year-old student from New York. My life's pretty boring usually, and I had dug myself into a hole of not going out and being a recluse. So, here's the deal. My friend invited me for a weekend camp in the woods. He's really into the whole naturist thing, being all free and comfortable without clothes. At first, I was a bit hesitant, but I figured, why not? It could be a fun experience, right? So, we head out into the woods, just me and him and a few other folks who are into the whole naturist lifestyle. The first few days are great, actually. It's kind of liberating, being out there in nature without a care in the world. I start to feel more comfortable with it, being naked and all. It's like shedding all your worries and just being one with nature. But then, things take a turn for the worse. It's midweek, and I'm out for a walk by myself, just enjoying the peace and quiet of the woods. That's when I see them, two men, lurking in the shadows, watching me with hungry eyes. I freeze, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind racing with fear. I know I should run, should get the hell out of there as fast as I can. But something keeps me rooted to the spot, like I'm hypnotized by their gaze. They start to approach me, their footsteps echoing through the silent forest. I can see the hunger in their eyes, the way they look at me like I'm some kind of prey. I try to call out for help, to scream for my friend or anyone else who might be nearby. But my voice catches in my throat, choked off by fear and panic. I'm backed into a corner, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. I can feel their hot breath on my skin, their hands reaching out to grab me. But then, out of nowhere, I hear a voice of my friend, calling out to me from somewhere in the distance. It's like a lifeline, pulling me back from the brink of disaster. I find my voice again, screaming for help as loud as I can. And just like that, the two men disappear into the shadows, melting away like they were never there. My friend finds me a few moments later, shaken but unarmed. He helps me back to camp, where we alert the authorities and get the hell out of there as fast as we can. It's a terrifying experience, one that I'll never forget as long as I live. But I'm grateful to be alive, to have escaped from those two men and their sinister intentions. I don't know what would have happened if my friend hadn't shown up when he did. We set up camp near a beautiful little clearing, with the stars shining bright overhead and the sounds of the forest all around us. It was peaceful, you know, the kind of place where you can just forget about all your worries for a while. But then, things took a turn for the worse. It was around 2 in the morning when we were all awoken by the sound of voices echoing through the trees. At first, we thought it might be some other campers nearby, you know, just having a good time like us. But as the voices got closer, we realized something was off. These guys didn't sound friendly. They sounded angry, aggressive, like they were looking for trouble. We huddled together in our tents, listening as the voices drew nearer and nearer. My heart was pounding in my chest, my palms sweaty with fear. I didn't know what to do, didn't know how to handle the situation. And then, suddenly, they were there, a group of boys, standing outside our campsite, shouting insults and threats at us. They were drunk, you could tell by the way they stumbled around and slurred their words. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. We tried to reason with them, to calm them down and get them to leave us alone. But they weren't having it. They wanted trouble, and they weren't going to leave until they got it. I could see the fear in my friend's eyes, mirrored in my own. We were outnumbered, outmatched, with nowhere to run and no one to help us. But then, just when it seemed like things couldn't get any worse, one of the boys pulled out a knife. My blood ran cold as I watched him brandish the blade, his eyes wild with rage. I knew we were in serious danger, that we needed to get out of there before things escalated any further. So, we did the only thing we could think of. We grabbed our stuff and ran. We tore through the woods, branches scratching at our faces and thorns tearing at our clothes. I could hear the boys shouting behind us, their footsteps echoing through the darkness. I didn't know if we were going to make it out alive, if we were ever going to see our families again. But we kept running, driven by fear and adrenaline, until we finally stumbled out of the woods and onto the road. We flagged down a passing car and begged the driver for help, telling them about the boys in the woods and the knife they had. They called the police, who came and escorted us back to safety. It was a terrifying experience, one that I wouldn't wish on anyone. But we made it out alive, thanks to quick thinking and a little bit of luck. I was out backpacking in the woods, just me and nature, you know? Everything was cool at first, just the sound of birds chirping and leaves rustling in the wind. But then, I stumbled upon this guy, lying on the ground, clutching his leg like it's the end of the world. I went over to see if he needed help, and that's when things started getting weird. The guy was all delirious, muttering about being hunted by someone with a rifle. I mean, who says stuff like that out of the blue? I tried to calm him down, reassure him that everything was going to be okay. But the more I talked to him, the more freaked out I got. It was like he could sense something out there in the woods, something dangerous lurking just beyond the trees. I didn't know what to do. I mean, I'm just a backpacker, not some hero or anything. But I couldn't just leave the guy there, you know? So, I helped him up and started leading him back to the trail. But as we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every rustle in the bushes, every snap of a twig, it felt like someone or something was following us, just out of sight. I kept glancing over my shoulder, scanning the trees for any sign of movement. But there was nothing, just the empty forest stretching out in every direction. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of a rifle shot echoing through the woods. My heart skipped a beat as I realized what was happening. The guy was right. We were being hunted. I grabbed the injured man's arm and broke into a run, adrenaline pumping through my veins as I tried to put as much distance between us and whoever was out there with a gun. But it was like they were always one step ahead of us, always getting closer no matter how fast we ran. I could hear branches snapping and leaves crunching behind us, growing louder with each passing second. I didn't know how much longer we could keep this up, didn't know if we were going to make it out of there alive. But I couldn't give up, couldn't let fear paralyze me. I had to keep going, keep fighting for survival. We pushed through the underbrush, stumbling over roots and rocks in our haste to escape. I could feel my lungs burning and my legs aching, but I didn't dare slow down, didn't dare give whoever was chasing us a chance to catch up. And then, just when it seemed like we couldn't run any further, we burst out of the trees and onto the trail. I could see the parking lot up ahead, the promise of safety just within reach. I didn't stop to catch my breath, didn't stop to look back. I just kept running, dragging the injured man along with me until we finally reached my car. I shoved him inside and slammed the door shut, fumbling with the keys as I tried to start the engine. My hands were shaking so bad, I could barely get the key in the ignition. But then, finally, the engine roared to life, and I hit the gas, tearing out of the parking lot and onto the road. I didn't stop driving until we were miles away from those woods, until I was sure we were safe. And even then, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over me like a heavy blanket. I don't know who was out there in the woods with a rifle, or why they were hunting us. It was a crisp autumn day when me and my friends decided to go on a hiking trip deep into the woods. We were excited to explore the great outdoors and spend some time away from the hustle and bustle of the city. As we trekked deeper into the forest, the trees grew thicker and the sounds of civilization faded away. After hours of hiking, we stumbled upon an isolated cabin nestled among the trees. It looked old and weather-beaten, but there was a welcoming light glowing from the windows. Curiosity got the best of us, and we decided to approach the cabin to see if anyone was home. To our surprise, an old hermit greeted us at the door with a warm smile. He seemed friendly enough, inviting us inside for a meal and a place to rest our weary legs. Grateful for his hospitality, we accepted his offer and stepped into the cozy cabin. As we sat around the table, the hermit regaled us with tales of his life in the woods and the adventures he'd had over the years. He seemed harmless enough, but there was something about him that made me feel uneasy, like there was something he wasn't telling us. As the night wore on, the atmosphere in the cabin grew increasingly tense. The hermit's smile seemed forced, and there was a hunger in his eyes that sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Then, as we finished our meal, the hermit's demeanor suddenly changed. His eyes grew dark and wild, and a sinister grin spread across his face. It was then that we realized the truth. The hermit was not the kindly old man he appeared to be. He lunged at us with a crazed look in his eyes, his hands reaching out to grab us with an unnatural strength. We fought back as best we could, but he was relentless, driven by a desperate hunger for human flesh. In the chaos that ensued, we managed to overpower the hermit and make a run for it, fleeing into the woods in a desperate bid for escape. We could hear his deranged laughter echoing through the trees as we ran, fueling our fear and urging us to run faster. We didn't stop until we were miles away from the cabin, exhausted and shaken but thankful to be alive. We vowed never to return to those woods again, haunted by the memory of the hermit's sinister intentions and the terror of that fateful night. As we made our way back to civilization, we couldn't help but wonder how many other unsuspecting hikers have fallen victim to the hermit's twisted appetites. It was a sobering thought, a reminder of the dangers that lurked in the darkness of the woods. But we were lucky. We had escaped with our lives, and that was all that mattered. We would never forget the horrors we had witnessed that night, but we were determined not to let it define us. We would move on, but we would always carry the memory of that night with us. I went out camping deep in the woods, wanting to get away from it all, you know? Just me, my tent, and the great outdoors. But little did I know, I had set up camp right near a bear's territory. Yeah, not the smartest move, I'll admit. So, I'm lying there in my tent, trying to get some shut-eye, when all of a sudden, I'm jolted awake by this low, guttural growling. At first, I think it's just my imagination, but then I hear it again, louder this time, and I know something's not right. I unzip the tent and peek outside, and that's when I see them, a pack of wolves, surrounding my campsite like I'm some kind of prey. My heart starts pounding in my chest as I realize I'm in serious trouble. I try to stay calm, remember what they say about not panicking in these kinds of situations. But it's hard, you know? These are wild animals we're talking about, not exactly the friendly type. I reach for my pocket knife, the only weapon I've got, and slowly start backing away from the wolves, trying to keep them in my line of sight at all times. But they just keep edging closer, their eyes glinting in the moonlight, hungry and aggressive. I know I can't outrun them, not with my injured ankle from that hike earlier in the day. So, I do the only thing I can think of. I start yelling, trying to scare them off with my voice alone. But it's like they're not even fazed, just keep advancing, inch by inch, until they're practically breathing down my neck. I can feel the sweat beating on my forehead, can hear my heart pounding in my ears. I take a step back, then another, until I'm practically backed up against a tree, nowhere left to run. That's when I remember the bear spray tucked away in my backpack, and I fumble for it with shaking hands. I manage to get the canister out just in time, and I unleash a stream of pepper spray at the nearest wolf, hoping to scare them off long enough for me to make a break for it. But it's like I've just pissed them off even more, because they start snarling and snapping at me, teeth bared and eyes wild with rage. I can feel their hot breath on my skin, can smell the stench of their fur, and I know I'm in serious trouble. I keep spraying, hoping against hope that it'll be enough to drive them away, but it's like they're relentless, just keep coming at me with everything they've got. And then, just when I think I can't take it anymore, I hear the sound of footsteps approaching from behind. I turn around, and to my relief, it's a park ranger, armed with a rifle and ready to help. He fires off a warning shot into the air, and the wolves scatter, disappearing back into the darkness of the woods. I collapse to the ground, shaking with relief and exhaustion, grateful to be alive. The ranger helps me to my feet, and together, we make our way back to safety, leaving behind the nightmare of that night in the woods. I never did find out what drew those wolves to my campsite, whether it was the smell of food or just bad luck. But one thing's for sure, I'll never forget the terror of being surrounded by those hungry, aggressive beasts, and the overwhelming sense of relief when help finally arrived. I stumbled upon this abandoned campsite while hiking deep in the woods, and let me tell you, it was like something straight out of a horror movie. The first thing I noticed was the eerie silence, like the forest was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest as I took in the scene before me. There were tents torn to shreds, half-eaten food scattered everywhere, and belongings strewn about like the campers had fled in a hurry. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong here, but I couldn't bring myself to turn back either. Call it curiosity or plain old stupidity, but I had to know what had happened. As I sifted through the debris, I stumbled upon a journal, weathered and water-stained but still legible. I flipped through the pages, my hands trembling with a mixture of fear and anticipation, and that's when I found it, the harrowing final days of the campers, detailed in chilling detail. According to the journal, they had been out here for weeks, enjoying nature and living off the land. But then, things took a turn for the worse. They started hearing strange noises in the night, like something moving just beyond the edge of their campsite. At first, they brushed it off as just their imagination playing tricks on them, but then they found footprints around their tents, big and heavy like those of a bear, but somehow different. They tried to leave, pack up their things and hike back to civilization, but every time they tried, they were met with some kind of obstacle, a fallen tree blocking the path, a sudden storm that seemed to come out of nowhere. And then, one by one, they started disappearing. First, it was their food, stolen in the middle of the night while they slept. Then, it was their belongings, vanishing without a trace. They were scared, terrified even, but they refused to leave each other behind. They huddled together in their remaining tents, clutching each other tight as the sounds of whatever was out there grew louder and closer. And then, one night, they heard it, a low, guttural growling, followed by the sound of something scratching at the walls of their tent. They huddled together in terror, praying for morning to come and save them from whatever lurked outside. But morning never came. Instead, they woke to find themselves surrounded by darkness, their tents shredded to pieces and their friends gone without a trace. I shuddered as I read those words, feeling a chill run down my spine. It was like I could feel the fear and desperation of those campers radiating off the pages, infecting me with their terror. I knew I had to get out of there, and fast. I stuffed the journal into my backpack and turned to leave. But that's when I heard it, the sound of something moving in the bushes behind me. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as I strained to listen for any sign of what was out there. And that's when I saw it, a pair of glowing eyes, shining in the darkness like two orbs of pure malevolence. I didn't stick around to see what it was. I turned and ran as fast as my legs would carry me, crashing through the underbrush in a blind panic as I tried to put as much distance between me and whatever was out there as possible. I didn't stop running until I reached the safety of my car, the engine roaring to life as I peeled out of there like my life depended on it, because it did. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just narrowly escaped something truly sinister. It was supposed to be a fun hiking trip with my friends, a chance to explore the great outdoors and enjoy each other's company. Little did we know, it would turn into a nightmare we'd never forget. We set out early in the morning, eager to escape the confines of the city and immerse ourselves in nature. The woods were quiet and serene as we trekked deeper into the forest, the only sound the crunch of leaves beneath our feet. But as we ventured further into the woods, a sense of unease began to creep over us. The atmosphere grew heavy, and the once familiar trails seemed to twist and turn in unfamiliar ways. It was as if the forest itself was alive, watching us with unseen eyes. We stumbled upon an area of the woods that seemed different from the rest, darker, more foreboding. It was a place that had earned a reputation for unexplained disappearances, a fact that sent shivers down our spines. Despite our trepidation, we pressed on, curiosity getting the better of us. As we delved deeper into the woods, the air grew colder and the trees seemed to close in around us, casting long shadows that danced in the moonlight. Suddenly, we heard a noise up ahead, a low, guttural growl that sent a chill down my spine. We froze in our tracks, fear gripping us like a vice as we strained to see what lay ahead. Then, out of the darkness emerged a figure, tall and menacing, with eyes that glowed in the darkness. It was a sight straight out of a nightmare, a creature of pure malevolence that seemed to feed on our fear. We turned and ran, our hearts pounding in our chests as we fled for our lives. But no matter how fast we ran, the creature was always right behind us, its breath hot on our necks as it pursued us through the darkness. We stumbled and fell, scrambling to get back to our feet as the creature closed in on us. It seemed like there was no escape, no way out of the nightmare that had become our reality. But just when it seemed like all hope was lost, we stumbled upon a clearing in the woods, a place of sanctuary where the creature could not follow. We collapsed in exhaustion, gasping for breath as we tried to process what had just happened. As the adrenaline began to fade, we realized the chilling truth behind the disappearances in the woods. The creature was real, and we had come face to face with it. It was a terrifying realization, one that would haunt us for the rest of our days. But we were the lucky ones. We had escaped with our lives, a feat that many others had not been so fortunate to achieve. We vowed never to return to those woods again, haunted by the memory of the creature that lurked within its depths. As we made our way back to civilization, we couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that the creature was still out there somewhere, waiting for its next victims. It was a chilling thought, one that would stay with us long after we had left the woods behind. I was out hiking in the woods, enjoying the fresh air and the sounds of nature all around me. But then, as I ventured deeper into the forest, I stumbled upon something that sent shivers down my spine, a ramshackle cabin hidden among the trees. Curiosity got the better of me, and I cautiously approached the cabin, my heart pounding in my chest with every step. As I got closer, I could see that the cabin was in a state of disrepair, with broken windows and rotting wood. But what really unnerved me was the feeling of being watched, like someone or something was observing my every move from the shadows of the trees. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone out here in the wilderness. I was about to turn and leave when I heard a voice, a gravelly, rasping voice that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. "Beware," it whispered, sending a chill down my spine. "Beware the darkness that lurks among the trees." I froze in terror, my breath catching in my throat as I tried to make sense of what I was hearing. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him, a figure emerging from the shadows, tall and haggard with wild eyes that seemed to pierce straight through me. He was a hermit, that much was clear, but there was something about him that set my teeth on edge. He looked at me with a mixture of fear and desperation, like he was pleading for me to listen to him. "They're coming," he said, his voice trembling with fear. "They're coming for you, just like they came for me." I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to run, to get as far away from this deranged hermit as possible, but another part of me couldn't shake the feeling that he might be telling the truth. I tried to ask him what he meant, to get some kind of explanation for his cryptic warnings, but he just shook his head and muttered something about the darkness before retreating back into the depths of the forest. I knew I should have left then and there, but something kept me rooted to the spot, a gnawing sense of unease that refused to let me go. And then, just as I was about to turn and run, I heard a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I spun around, my heart pounding in my chest as I scanned the trees for any sign of what was out there. And that's when I saw them, two figures emerging from the darkness, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. I didn't wait around to see what they were. I turned and ran as fast as my legs would carry me, crashing through the underbrush in a blind panic as I tried to put as much distance between me and whatever was out there as possible. But no matter how fast I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were right behind me, their hot breath on the back of my neck as they chased me through the darkness. I stumbled and fell more times than I could count, my body battered and bruised from the unforgiving terrain. But still, I pressed on, driven by sheer terror and the desperate need to escape whatever was hunting me in the night. And then, just when I thought I couldn't run anymore, I saw the faint glow of lights in the distance, a sign that civilization was near. With renewed determination, I pushed myself to go faster, to reach the safety of those lights before it was too late. And finally, after what felt like an eternity, I burst out of the forest and into the open, gasping for breath as I collapsed onto the ground. I didn't stop running until I reached the nearest town, where I collapsed in exhaustion and relief, safe at last from whatever horrors lurked in the darkness of the woods. I went exploring in the woods, searching for adventure. I stumbled upon a network of caves hidden deep within the trees, and curiosity got the best of me. I ventured inside, the darkness swallowing me whole as I left the safety of the forest behind. The air was cool and musty, and the sound of my footsteps echoed off the walls as I made my way deeper into the cave. But then, disaster struck, the entrance collapsed behind me, trapping me inside with no way out. Panic set in as I realized the gravity of my situation. I was alone, deep underground, with no way to communicate with the outside world. My only hope was to find another way out before it was too late. I pressed on, my heart pounding in my chest as I navigated the labyrinthine tunnels of the cave. But as I moved deeper into the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, lurking in the shadows just out of sight. Every sound seemed magnified in the silence of the cave, and I jumped at the slightest noise, my nerves on edge as I tried to stay calm. But no matter how hard I tried to rationalize my fear, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone down here. I stumbled upon a small chamber deep within the cave, and I took refuge there, hoping to catch my breath and gather my thoughts. But as I sat in the darkness, I could hear something moving in the shadows, something sinister and malevolent that sent shivers down my spine. I knew I had to keep moving, to find a way out of this nightmare before it was too late. But with every step I took, the darkness seemed to close in around me, swallowing me whole as I struggled to find my way in the suffocating blackness. I stumbled and fell more times than I could count, my body bruised and battered from the unforgiving terrain. But still, I pressed on, driven by sheer terror and the desperate need to escape. And then, just when I thought I couldn't go on any longer, I saw a faint glimmer of light up ahead, a sign that there might be a way out of this hellish labyrinth after all. With renewed determination, I pushed myself to go faster, to reach the safety of that light before it was too late. But as I got closer, I realized that the light wasn't coming from the outside world, it was coming from something else, something lurking in the darkness that I couldn't see. I froze in terror as I realized what was happening. I was being hunted, stalked by something sinister and malevolent that wanted nothing more than to drag me down into the depths of the earth and consume me whole. With no other options left, I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my chest as I raced through the darkness, desperate to escape whatever horror lurked in the shadows. And then, just when I thought I couldn't go on any longer, I saw a glimmer of daylight up ahead, a sign that I had finally found a way out of this nightmare. With one final burst of adrenaline-fueled strength, I pushed myself to go faster, to reach the safety of the outside world before it was too late. And finally, After what felt like an eternity, I burst out of the cave and into the blinding sunlight, gasping for breath as I collapsed onto the ground, safe at last from whatever horrors lurked in the darkness below. So, me and my friends decided to go camping last weekend. We figured it'd be a fun way to get away from the stress of everyday life and reconnect with nature. But let me tell you, things didn't exactly go according to plan. The first night, everything seemed normal enough. We set up our tents, built a fire, roasted some marshmallows, the usual camping stuff. But as the night wore on, I started to feel like we were being watched. I couldn't shake the feeling that there were eyes on us, lurking in the darkness just beyond the edge of the firelight. I tried to brush it off as just my imagination running wild, but the feeling only grew stronger as the night went on. And then, just as we were all getting ready to turn in for the night, I caught a glimpse of something moving in the trees. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, but then I saw it again, a shadowy figure, lurking just beyond the reach of the fire. I tried to point it out to my friends, but by the time they turned to look, it was gone. We all laughed it off, chalking it up to nerves in too many horror movies, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I lay awake for hours, listening to the sounds of the forest and trying to convince myself that it was all in my head. But the next night, the figures were back, and this time, they were closer. I could see them moving through the trees, their shapes distorted and twisted in the darkness. I tried to wake my friends up to show them, but they just grumbled and rolled over, too tired to care. I felt a growing sense of unease as the figures drew closer, their intentions still unknown. I knew we needed to get out of there, but I also knew that we were miles away from the nearest town, with no way to call for help. I tried to convince myself that it was just a prank, some local kids messing with us for fun, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. There was something about those figures that didn't feel human, something dark and sinister lurking just beneath the surface. As the night wore on, the figures drew closer and closer, until they were just beyond the edge of the firelight. I could hear them whispering to each other, their voices low and guttural, sending shivers down my spine. I knew we couldn't stay there any longer. We had to get out of there, no matter what. So, as soon as dawn broke, I woke my friends up and told them we needed to pack up and leave. They grumbled and complained, but I could see the fear in their eyes, too. We packed up our gear as quickly as we could and made a break for it, running through the woods as fast as our legs would carry us. I didn't dare look back, afraid of what I might see lurking in the shadows behind us. We made it back to civilization in one piece, but I'll never forget the terror of those nights in the woods, or the feeling of being hunted by something I couldn't see or understand. I don't know what those figures were or what they wanted, but I know one thing for sure: I'll never go camping in those woods again. I was out hiking in the woods, enjoying the solitude and beauty of nature when I stumbled upon something that would haunt me forever. Deep in the heart of the forest, I found a traumatized survivor, their eyes wide with fear as they recounted a horrifying ordeal. The survivor spoke of being pursued by unknown assailants, their every move watched and tracked by unseen eyes. They spoke of running through the trees, the sound of footsteps echoing behind them, their heart pounding in their chest as they desperately tried to escape. As I listened to their story, a chill ran down my spine. Something about their tale felt all too real, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone out here in the wilderness. I knew I had to help the survivor, to get them to safety before it was too late. But as I looked around, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that whatever had chased them was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I led the survivor through the forest, trying to stay calm and focused despite the rising sense of dread that threatened to overwhelm me. But with every step we took, the feeling of being watched grew stronger, until it felt like there were eyes on us from every direction. We stumbled upon a clearing in the woods, a small patch of sunlight breaking through the dense canopy above. But even in the light, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that danger lurked just beyond the edge of the trees. I urged the survivor to keep moving, to stay close to me as we made our way through the forest. But no matter how fast we ran, it felt like we were always one step behind whatever was chasing us. As night fell, we took refuge in a small cave, the darkness providing some measure of safety from whatever lurked outside. But even in the relative safety of the cave, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom that hung heavy in the air. We huddled together in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the forest outside. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a shiver down my spine as I waited for whatever was hunting us to make its move. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I heard it, the sound of footsteps outside the cave, slow and deliberate, like whatever was out there was taunting us, toying with us before it struck. I held my breath, my heart pounding in my chest as I waited for the inevitable. But instead of attacking, the footsteps faded away into the night, leaving us alone in the darkness once more. I knew we couldn't stay in the cave forever, that eventually we would have to venture back out into the forest and face whatever horrors lurked in the shadows. But for now, we were safe, and that was all that mattered. As dawn broke, we emerged from the cave, blinking in the early morning light as we made our way back through the forest. The survivor clung to me, their grip tight with fear as we moved through the trees, each step bringing us closer to safety. And then, just when I thought we were out of danger, I heard it, the sound of laughter echoing through the trees, low and menacing, sending a chill down my spine as I realized that whatever had been chasing us was still out there, waiting for us to let our guard down. But I refused to give in to fear. I tightened my grip on the survivor's hand and pressed on, determined to get us both to safety no matter what horrors awaited us in the darkness. And as we emerged from the forest, battered but alive, I knew that we had survived something truly terrifying, something that would haunt us both for the rest of our days. We were excited for our camping trip, eager to escape the hustle and bustle of city life and immerse ourselves in the tranquility of nature. But as we arrived at the remote campground deep in the woods, a sense of unease washed over us. The campground was eerily deserted, with not a soul in sight. It was as if the entire area had been abandoned, leaving us feeling isolated and vulnerable. Despite our reservations, we decided to set up camp and make the most of our weekend getaway. But as night fell, strange things began to happen. We heard noises in the darkness, rustling in the bushes, footsteps in the undergrowth. It was enough to send chills down our spines and set our nerves on edge. As we huddled around the campfire, trying to ward off the growing sense of unease, we couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. It was as if unseen eyes were lurking in the shadows, studying our every move. Then, things took a turn for the worse. Our tents were ransacked, with our belongings scattered across the forest floor. It was a terrifying sight, one that left us feeling vulnerable and exposed. We searched the area, hoping to find the culprit responsible for the vandalism. But there was no sign of anyone, no footprints, no traces of human activity. As the night wore on, the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. It was as if the very air around us was charged with malevolence, suffocating us with its intensity. Then, we heard whispers in the darkness, faint, barely audible, but unmistakably human. It sent shivers down our spines, filling us with a sense of dread unlike anything we had ever experienced. We tried to ignore the whispers, to convince ourselves that they were nothing more than a trick of the mind. But deep down, we knew the truth. We were not alone in the woods, and whatever lurked in the shadows had malicious intent. As dawn broke, we made a hasty decision to pack up and leave the campground behind. But as we hurriedly gathered our belongings, we realized that one of our friends was missing. Panic set in as we frantically searched for our missing companion, calling out their name into the empty woods. But there was no response, only silence, broken only by the sounds of our own frantic footsteps. We knew we had to find our friend and get out of the woods as quickly as possible. But as we searched, the feeling of being watched intensified, filling us with a sense of dread unlike anything we had ever experienced. Then, we found them, or rather, what was left of them. It was a sight straight out of a nightmare, one that would haunt us for the rest of our lives. Their body lay torn and mangled, surrounded by signs of a struggle. It was a grisly sight, one that left us reeling with shock and horror. But there was no time to dwell on what had happened. We knew we had to get out of the woods and back to civilization before it was too late. As we fled the campground, the feeling of being watched followed us, a constant presence that seemed to dog our every step. It was as if the woods themselves were alive with malevolence, intent on claiming us as their next victims. But somehow, against all odds, we made it out of the woods alive. It was a miracle, one that we would never forget. I went hiking in the woods, seeking solace in nature's embrace. But as I ventured deeper into the forest, I stumbled upon something that chilled me to the bone. A group of children emerged from the shadows, their eyes vacant and devoid of humanity. They moved like animals, their movements jerky and unpredictable. At first, I thought they were lost or in need of help. But as I approached them, I sensed something was off. Something sinister lurking beneath their innocent facades. I tried to communicate with them, offering them food and water. But they recoiled at my touch, their expressions unreadable and their responses nonsensical. As I lingered in their presence, a sense of unease washed over me. It was as if the very air around us was charged with tension, suffocating me with its intensity. I tried to leave, to retreat back to the safety of civilization. But the children followed me, their eyes burning with a hunger that sent shivers down my spine. I quickened my pace, hoping to outrun them and escape their clutches. But they matched my every step, their presence a constant reminder of the danger lurking in the shadows. I realized then that these children were not the innocent victims I had initially thought. They were feral, wild creatures of the woods, capable of unspeakable acts of violence. I knew I had to get away from them, to put as much distance between us as possible. But as I fled through the forest, I could feel their eyes boring into my back, their silent presence a constant threat. I stumbled and fell, my heart pounding in my chest as I scrambled to my feet and continued running. But no matter how fast I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still following me, their twisted forms lurking just out of sight. I pushed myself harder, determined to escape the nightmare that had consumed me. But as I emerged from the forest, I realized the horror was far from over. The children had led me into a trap, surrounding me on all sides with nowhere to run. I was trapped, at the mercy of their feral instincts and savage hunger. I tried to reason with them, to plead for my life. But they were beyond reason, their minds consumed by primal urges and animalistic instincts. I knew then that I was in grave danger, that these children were capable of unspeakable acts of violence. I had to find a way to escape, to outsmart them and get back to safety. I scanned my surroundings, searching for any sign of hope or salvation. And then, I saw it, a narrow path leading deeper into the woods, away from the children and their twisted games. I didn't hesitate. I plunged into the undergrowth, pushing myself to the limit as I raced through the forest, desperate to put as much distance between myself and the horrors that lurked within. And then, just when I thought I couldn't run any further, I saw a glimmer of light through the trees. It was the edge of the forest, the gateway to safety and salvation. With one final burst of energy, I pushed myself forward, breaking free from the suffocating grip of the woods and into the open air. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath as the realization of what had just happened washed over me. I had escaped, survived the horrors of the forest, and lived to tell the tale. I was out hiking in the woods, enjoying the tranquility of nature when I stumbled upon something that would turn my peaceful day into a nightmare. Deep in the heart of the forest, I encountered a savage poacher, a man with a look of pure malice in his eyes. He was armed with a rifle and had a menacing aura about him that sent chills down my spine. As I tried to back away, he fixed me with a cold stare and warned me to stay out of his territory. But I couldn't just turn and run. I knew that if I did, he would likely shoot me down without a second thought. So, I stood my ground, trying to reason with him, but he wasn't interested in listening. Instead, he raised his rifle and fired a warning shot into the air, the sound echoing through the trees like a death knell. I knew then that I was in real trouble, that this man would stop at nothing to protect his illegal hunting grounds. I turned and ran, the sound of his footsteps echoing behind me as I sprinted through the trees, my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to put as much distance between us as possible. But no matter how fast I ran, I could still hear him behind me, his heavy breathing and the sound of twigs snapping underfoot driving me forward with a sense of urgency I had never known before. I ducked and weaved through the trees, trying to lose him in the dense undergrowth, but he was relentless, his footsteps always close behind me no matter how hard I tried to shake him. I stumbled and fell, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I struggled to get back to my feet. But before I could, he was upon me, his hand closing around my throat as he dragged me to my feet. I struggled and fought, trying to break free from his iron grip, but it was no use. He was too strong, too determined to let me go. And as he raised his rifle and leveled it at my head, I knew that this was it, that I was about to die. But just as he was about to pull the trigger, there was a sudden commotion in the bushes nearby. The poacher turned to investigate, giving me the chance I needed to break free and run for my life. I didn't stop running until I was well clear of the forest, my heart still pounding in my chest as I collapsed to the ground, gasping for air and shaking with fear. I knew that I had come dangerously close to death that day, that if it hadn't been for whatever had spooked the poacher at the last moment, I would not be alive. I was out on patrol, deep in the heart of the woods, when I got the call. There had been a disturbance reported in the area, and I was the closest ranger available to investigate. As I made my way through the dense undergrowth, I could feel a sense of unease settling over me. There was something about the atmosphere in the forest that felt off, like I was being watched by unseen eyes. But I shook off the feeling and pressed on, determined to get to the bottom of whatever was going on. As I approached the source of the disturbance, I could hear voices up ahead, low and urgent, like people whispering in the darkness. I crept closer, trying to get a better look without being seen. What I saw sent a shiver down my spine. There, in a small clearing, were two men hunched over something on the ground. I couldn't make out what they were doing at first, but as I got closer, I could see that they were digging a hole in the earth with their bare hands, their faces twisted in concentration as they worked. I watched in horror as they continued to dig, their movements frantic and desperate. There was something about the way they were acting that filled me with a sense of dread, like whatever they were burying was something they wanted to keep hidden at all costs. I knew I had to intervene, to stop whatever was happening before it was too late. But as I stepped forward, a twig snapped beneath my foot, alerting the men to my presence. They turned to face me, their eyes white with fear and anger. And that's when I saw it. In the hole they had been digging lay the body of a woman, her face pale and lifeless in the dim light of the forest. I felt my stomach churn at the sight, bile rising in my throat as I struggled to comprehend what I was seeing. These men, these strangers in the woods, had killed her, and now they were trying to cover up their crime. I knew I had to act fast, to stop them before they could do any more harm. I reached for my radio, calling for backup as I stepped forward to confront them. But before I could say a word, they were upon me, their fists flying as they tried to overpower me. I fought back with all the strength I had, but they were too strong, too determined to silence me. I felt blows raining down on me from all sides, pain shooting through my body with each strike. But I refused to give up, refused to let them win. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, I heard the sound of approaching sirens in the distance. Backup had arrived, just in time to save me from certain death. The men fled into the forest, disappearing into the shadows before they could be caught. But I knew that they wouldn't get far, that justice would be served for the woman they had killed. I was hiking in the woods, just enjoying nature and all that. It was supposed to be a relaxing day, just me and the trees. But then, things got weird. I noticed someone else was out there, too. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe just another hiker, right? But then I started to get this feeling, like I was being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder, but there was no one there. It was creepy, like someone was playing games with me. I tried to shake it off and keep walking, but the feeling didn't go away. And then I heard it. Footsteps, crunching on the leaves behind me. I turned around, but there was no one there. Just the empty woods. I started to pick up the pace, but the footsteps kept getting closer. I could feel my heart racing, like I was being chased by something. But every time I looked back, there was nothing there. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. And then, I saw him. A figure, lurking in the shadows, just watching me with those cold eyes. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to run, but I was frozen in place. And then, he started moving towards me, slowly but steadily, like a predator closing in on its prey. I knew I had to get out of there, so I turned and ran as fast as I could. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake him. It was like he was always one step ahead of me, just waiting for the right moment to strike. I kept running deeper and deeper into the woods, but it felt like I was running in circles. I was lost, disoriented, and the hunter was closing in on me with every passing second. I could hear him getting closer, his heavy footsteps echoing through the trees. I knew I had to find a way out, or else I'd be trapped in this nightmare forever. I stumbled over roots and branches, my lungs burning with every breath. But I kept going, fueled by fear and adrenaline, desperate to escape the hunter's grasp. And then, just when I thought I couldn't go on any longer, I saw it. A clearing up ahead, with the sunlight streaming through the trees. I pushed myself harder, running towards the light with everything I had. I burst out of the woods, gasping for air, and collapsed on the ground. I lay there for what felt like hours, too exhausted to move. But when I finally looked up, the hunter was nowhere to be seen. I don't know what his intentions were, or why he was chasing me. But one thing's for sure, I'll never forget the terror of being hunted in those deep, dark woods. I never imagined that a simple hike in the woods would turn into a nightmare beyond my wildest imagination. It all started innocently enough, just a group of friends looking for adventure in the great outdoors. As we ventured deeper into the forest, we stumbled upon something that sent chills down our spines, a series of bizarre and sinister challenges laid out before us, like something out of a horror movie. At first, we thought it was just a prank, a harmless game designed to spook us and get our hearts racing. But as we delved deeper into the twisted puzzles, we realized that this was no ordinary game, it was a fight for survival. Each challenge seemed designed to push us to our limits, testing our strength, our wits, and our courage. And as we struggled to overcome each obstacle, we couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that someone, or something, was lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. The stakes grew higher with each passing moment, our fear and paranoia threatening to consume us. But we pressed on, driven by the desperate hope that we could find a way out of this nightmare and back to safety. But the game was relentless, the challenges growing more twisted and sadistic with each passing moment. And as we fought to stay alive, we realized that we were not the only ones being hunted, that there were others out there, victims of the same twisted game, struggling to survive just like us. We banded together, drawing strength from each other as we faced the horrors of the forest head-on. But as the challenges grew more intense, we began to question whether we would ever make it out alive. The hours stretched into days, our bodies weary and our spirits broken. But still, we fought on, refusing to give in to despair. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, we stumbled upon a clue, a sign that there was a way out of this nightmare, if only we were brave enough to seize it. With renewed determination, we pushed forward, our minds racing with the possibilities of escape. But as we neared the end of our journey, we realized that the true horror lay not in the challenges themselves, but in the mind of the sadistic mastermind behind them. For as we emerged from the forest, battered and bruised but alive, we realized that the game was far from over, that the true test of our survival had only just begun. But we were not alone. We had each other, and together, we would face whatever horrors awaited us on the other side. And as we walked away from the forest, our hearts heavy with the weight of what we had endured, we knew that we would never forget the twisted game that had almost cost us our lives. I went camping with my friends deep in the woods. It was supposed to be a fun weekend, you know, just getting away from it all and enjoying nature. But things took a turn for the worse real quick. We set up our tents near a small clearing, surrounded by tall trees. It was peaceful at first, just the sound of birds chirping and leaves rustling in the breeze. But then, as night fell, things got creepy. We were sitting around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and telling stories, when we heard footsteps approaching from the darkness. We all froze, listening intently as the footsteps drew closer. And then, out of the shadows emerged a man. He was tall and gaunt, with sunken eyes and a sinister grin. He looked like he hadn't showered in weeks, and his clothes were dirty and torn. We tried to be friendly, you know, asked him if he needed help or anything. But he just stood there, staring at us with this unsettling intensity. We started to feel uneasy, like something was off about this guy. But before we could do anything, he started talking. His voice was low and gravelly, sending shivers down my spine. He told us he lived out here in the woods, all alone. Said he didn't like visitors, especially not ones who came uninvited. And then he started laughing, this hollow, mirthless laugh that made my blood run cold. We tried to play it cool, you know, act like we weren't scared. But deep down, we knew we were in trouble. This guy was bad news, and we needed to get out of there fast. We made some excuse about needing to head back to town, packed up our stuff as quickly as we could, and got the hell out of there. But as we were leaving, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching us, lurking in the shadows, just waiting for the right moment to strike. We didn't stop until we were miles away from that place, safe in the comfort of civilization. But even now, I can't shake the memory of that creepy man in the woods, and I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't gotten out when we did. I work as a park ranger, and part of my job is to patrol the remote areas of the woods, making sure everything is okay and keeping an eye out for any signs of trouble. Most of the time, it's pretty quiet out there, just the sounds of nature and the occasional hiker passing through. But one day, while I was out on patrol, I stumbled upon something that sent chills down my spine. I found a hidden clearing deep in the woods, adorned with strange symbols and artifacts scattered around the ground. At first, I thought it might just be some kind of prank or something, but the more I looked around, the more I realized that this was something much more sinister. The symbols were like nothing I'd ever seen before, and they seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. I tried to brush it off and tell myself that it was just some kids messing around, but deep down, I knew there was something more going on here. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over me like a dark cloud. I decided to investigate further, to see if I could find any clues as to who might be responsible for this. As I searched the clearing, I stumbled upon a hidden entrance to a cave, obscured by thick brush and vines. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I should go inside, but curiosity got the better of me. I had to know what was lurking in the darkness, what secrets this cave might hold. I cautiously made my way inside, my flashlight cutting through the gloom like a beacon of light. The air was thick and heavy, and the further I went, the stronger the sense of dread grew. I soon came upon a chamber deep within the cave, lit by flickering torches and filled with the smell of incense and burning candles. It was like something out of a nightmare. Strange symbols covered the walls, and strange artifacts were scattered around the room. But what chilled me to the bone was the sound coming from the far end of the chamber, the sound of chanting, low and rhythmic, like the beating of a heart. I crept closer, careful to remain hidden in the shadows, and what I saw sent a shiver down my spine. A group of cloaked figures stood in a circle, their faces obscured by hoods, their voices raised in a strange, guttural language. I watched in horror as they performed their dark rituals, their movements fluid and graceful, like dancers in a macabre ballet. I couldn't tear my eyes away, couldn't look away from the scene unfolding before me. But then, one of the figures turned, their eyes meeting mine across the dimly lit chamber. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, as the figure pointed a finger in my direction and uttered a single word, "Intruder." I didn't wait around to see what happened next. I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing off the walls of the cave as I raced back the way I came. I didn't stop until I burst out into the blinding sunlight, gasping for breath and shaking with fear. I knew I had to report what I had seen, but part of me was afraid that no one would believe me, that they would think I was crazy or making it all up. But I had to try, had to warn someone about the danger lurking in those woods. I made my way back to the ranger station as quickly as I could, my heart still pounding in my chest, my mind reeling with the horrors I had witnessed. I stumbled through the door and practically collapsed into the nearest chair, my hands shaking as I tried to catch my breath. I told my colleagues everything, about the hidden clearing, the cave, the cultists performing their dark rituals. They listened in silence, their expressions growing more and more grave with each word I spoke. When I had finished, there was a long moment of silence, broken only by the sound of our breathing. And then, one of my colleagues spoke up, their voice low and serious. "We need to investigate this further," they said. "We can't let whatever's happening out there continue unchecked." And so, we gathered our gear and set out into the woods once more, determined to uncover the truth behind the hidden clearing and put an end to whatever dark forces were at work there. It was a dangerous mission, fraught with peril at every turn, but we pressed on, driven by a sense of duty and a desire to protect those who might stumble upon the cult's dark rituals. In the end, we were able to shut down the cult and put an end to their dark practices, but the memory of that day will haunt me forever. I've seen things out there in the woods that I can't explain, things that still keep me up at night, staring into the darkness and wondering what else might be lurking out there, waiting to be discovered. It was supposed to be a fun camping trip with my friends, a chance to escape the hustle and bustle of the city and reconnect with nature. But as we ventured deeper into the woods, we stumbled upon something that would haunt us for the rest of our lives. Nestled deep in the heart of the forest, we came across an old, abandoned cabin, a relic from a time long forgotten. At first, we were intrigued by the sight of the dilapidated structure, its walls weathered and worn by years of neglect. But as we ventured inside, our excitement quickly turned to horror. The interior of the cabin was a scene straight out of a nightmare, the furniture overturned, the walls stained with blood, and the air thick with the stench of decay. We knew then that we had stumbled upon something sinister, something that was not meant to be found. But curiosity got the better of us, and we pressed on, determined to uncover the truth behind the cabin's dark past. As we explored further, we discovered disturbing evidence of past violence, blood-stained clothes, broken furniture, and strange symbols etched into the walls. It was as if the cabin itself was a prison, trapping the souls of its unfortunate victims for all eternity. But the horror didn't end there. As we delved deeper into the cabin's secrets, we began to hear strange noises echoing through the darkness, whispers and footsteps, as if the ghosts of the past were still lingering in the shadows, watching our every move. We tried to leave, to escape the nightmare that had consumed us, but it was too late. The forest seemed to stretch on forever, the trees closing in around us like prison walls, trapping us in a maze of darkness and despair. And then, just when we thought things couldn't get any worse, we heard the sound of footsteps approaching, slow, deliberate, and unmistakably human. We froze in terror, our hearts pounding in our chests as we waited for whatever horror awaited us. And then, emerging from the shadows, we saw him, a figure clad in tattered clothes, his eyes wild with madness. He was a vagrant, a lost soul driven to the brink of insanity by the horrors of the forest. But as he drew closer, we realized that he was not alone. Behind him, lurking in the darkness, were others like him, twisted, grotesque figures with eyes devoid of humanity, their mouths twisted into cruel smiles. We knew then that we were not dealing with ordinary men, but something far more sinister, something that had been lurking in the woods long before we ever set foot there. With a primal scream, we turned and ran, our hearts pounding in our chests as we fled into the darkness. And as we emerged from the forest, battered and bruised but alive, we knew that we would never forget the horrors we had witnessed in that abandoned cabin in the woods. I found myself deep in the woods, the sun dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness. My heart raced as I realized my GPS had malfunctioned, leaving me stranded and disoriented in the wilderness. Panic threatened to consume me as I frantically tried to find my bearings, but the dense trees seemed to close in around me, their twisted branches reaching out like gnarled fingers grasping for my sanity. Every step I took felt like a step deeper into the unknown, my sense of direction slipping away with each passing moment. I called out for help, but my voice seemed to be swallowed by the oppressive silence of the forest. As night fell, the woods took on a sinister aura, the shadows dancing and shifting in the moonlight, playing tricks on my already frazzled mind. I stumbled over roots and rocks, each sound echoing through the trees like a mocking laugh. Suddenly, I heard a rustling in the underbrush, and my heart leapt into my throat. I froze, straining my ears for any sign of what could be lurking in the darkness. But the rustling stopped as suddenly as it had begun, leaving me alone once again with only the sounds of my own ragged breaths to keep me company. I pressed on, my legs aching with exhaustion as I pushed through the dense undergrowth, my mind racing with thoughts of what horrors might be waiting for me in the darkness. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I stumbled upon a clearing in the woods, the moonlight casting an eerie glow over the scene before me. In the center of the clearing stood a series of bizarre and terrifying obstacles, each one more twisted and macabre than the last. There were traps set with cruel efficiency, their mechanisms designed to ensnare anyone who dared to venture too close. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that I was now alone in the forest, that someone or something had set these traps with malicious intent. I tried to backtrack, to find another way out of the woods, but no matter which direction I turned, I found myself faced with more of these sinister obstacles, each one seemingly designed to keep me trapped in the forest forever. Fear gripped me like a vice as I realized that I was being hunted, that whatever had set these traps was closing in on me with each passing moment. I pushed myself to keep moving, to keep searching for a way out, but the forest seemed to conspire against me, its dark and twisted heart intent on claiming me as its own. Just when I thought I couldn't go on any longer, I saw a glimmer of light in the distance, the first sign of civilization I had seen since my ordeal began. With renewed determination, I pushed through the undergrowth, the light growing brighter with each step until finally, I burst through the trees and stumbled into a clearing. I collapsed to the ground, tears streaming down my face as I realized that I was safe, that I had escaped the horrors of the forest. But even as I lay there, gasping for breath and trembling with exhaustion, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for its next victim. The night was thick with darkness as we ventured into the woods, the path illuminated only by the feeble light of our flashlights. The crisp air hung heavy around us, filled with the sounds of rustling leaves and distant howls of nocturnal creatures. As we hiked deeper into the forest, a sense of unease settled over us, like a weight pressing down on our chests. I glanced nervously at my partner, their face drawn tight with apprehension mirroring my own. Suddenly, we heard it, a faint, eerie chanting drifting through the trees, sending shivers down our spines. We exchanged a nervous glance, our steps faltering as we strained to listen. The chanting grew louder, more insistent, pulling us inexorably towards its source. Against our better judgment, we found ourselves drawn towards it, clearing up ahead, the air thick with the scent of incense and something darker, more primal. As we emerged into the clearing, our breath caught in our throats at the sight before us. A group of hooded figures stood in a circle, their voices raised in a haunting chorus that seemed to echo through the night. We froze, rooted to the spot as we watched the ritual unfold before our eyes. Symbols were etched into the earth, candles flickering ominously in the darkness, casting long shadows that danced across the forest floor. My heart hammered in my chest as I realized the gravity of the situation. This was no ordinary gathering. This was something dark and otherworldly, something beyond our comprehension. But before we could turn and flee, the figures turned towards us, their eyes gleaming with an unnatural light that sent a chill down my spine. I felt a cold dread settle over me as I realized that we were trapped, ensnared in a web of darkness that seemed to tighten around us with each passing moment. Desperate, we tried to run, to escape the clutches of whatever malevolent force held us captive. But no matter which way we turned, we found ourselves blocked at every turn, the figures closing in on us with each passing moment. As they drew nearer, I felt a primal fear rise up within me, threatening to consume me whole. But even in the face of certain doom, we refused to give up hope, fighting tooth and nail to break free from the grip of the darkness. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, we stumbled upon a narrow path leading out of the clearing, the darkness slowly giving way to the faint light of dawn. With one final burst of strength, we raced towards the safety of the path, the chanting fading into the distance behind us as we ran. Breathless and shaken, we emerged from the woods, the first light of dawn casting a warm glow over the horizon. We collapsed onto the forest floor, our hearts still pounding in our chests as we struggled to catch our breath. But even as we lay there, safe at last, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had narrowly escaped something unspeakable. I was in the middle of the woods, camping alone under the vast expanse of the night sky. The crackling of the campfire was the only sound breaking the silence of the forest around me. The air was cool, and the shadows danced eerily among the trees. I was about to drift off to sleep when something stirred me awake. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized I was not alone. There, surrounding my campsite, stood a group of strangers. They were eerily still, their faces hidden in the darkness, watching me with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. Fear seized me, and I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding in my chest. I stumbled backward, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what was happening. How had they found me? And what did they want? But there was no time to ponder these questions. I knew I had to get out of there, and fast. With trembling hands, I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam casting long, twisted shadows on the forest floor as I frantically searched for an escape route. But as I turned to flee, I realized I was surrounded. The strangers had closed in around me, their faces still obscured in the darkness. Panic surged through me as I realized there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. I tried to reason with them, to plead for mercy, but they remained silent, their gaze unwavering. It was as if they were waiting for something terrible and inevitable. With a sinking feeling in my stomach, I knew I had no choice but to fight. I lashed out, striking out blindly at the strangers in a desperate bid to break free from their grasp. But it was like fighting against shadows, their forms shifting and twisting in the darkness. As the struggle raged on, I felt something deep within me snap. Fear gave way to rage, and I fought with a ferocity I never knew I possessed. But even as I fought, I could feel myself growing weaker, my strength draining away with each passing moment. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, I saw it, a glimmer of light in the darkness, a path leading to safety. With one final burst of adrenaline, I broke free from the grasp of the strangers and raced towards the light, my heart pounding in my chest. As I emerged from the forest, the first light of dawn greeted me, casting a warm glow over the horizon. I collapsed onto the forest floor, my body spent from the ordeal. But even as I lay there, gasping for breath, I knew I had escaped something unspeakable, something that lurked in the darkness of the woods, waiting to claim its next victim.